Hi everyone. In Project 5, we'll be working with classes. So you will define a class and you will define it in the header file. You will create the implementation file that has all the function definitions, and then you're going to test that with your main.cpp or your driver program. So the objective of the project itself is to track division sales. So you will be tracking sales figures, and I'll go into some detail on which data members we should be tracking specifically. So the class should be named Division Sales, just as I have it here on this slide. As I mentioned before, you'll be creating three separate files. You're going to create the divisionsales.h file, which is the class declaration, the divisionsales.cpp file, which has the function definitions for all of the functions listed in the divisionsales.h file, and then finally you'll have main.cpp, which is going to be the driver program that tests and executes all of the functions. So when you submit your work, you're going to need to submit all three files, zip them up, and attach them in Brightspace. Just as a note to keep in mind, you do not need to use constant functions or macro guards in this project, since we'll definitely be doing that in the next project. As far as what you should name your REPL, since your REPL is going to contain all three files, please name your REPL your last name and then the number 5, so include your last name there where it says last name, and this way I can track what your submission is. Okay, so the first file I want to discuss is the .h file. Should be named divisionsales.h, and there should be 4 data members. The first data member should be the division code declared as a string, and it would be used to identify the division. So the division could be north, northwest, it could be south, east, etc., etc. The second data member should be num employees. This should be stored as an integer, and it would track the total number of employees for the division. The third data item is year to date, and this will track the sales earned throughout the year to the current date. So since it's a sales figure, it should be stored as a double. And then the last data member should be the sales target, which is the goal sales amount for the year. And again, since it's a sales figure, it should be stored as a double. A little bit more information about divisionsales.h. Now, I would prefer no inline functions here, right? So the objective of this project is for you to get some experience with splitting into 3 separate files, which is why I don't want any inline functions. All your function definitions should be in your implementation file. In your .h file, you should have just the function prototypes. I do want the inclusion of 2 constructors, so you should have a default constructor called division sales, and then you should have a constructor with parameters, which would have all 4 of the data members passed as parameters. Okay, again, a little more about divisionsales.h. In addition to the 2 constructors, you're going to have 11 function prototypes. There will be 4 set functions, 1 for each of the 4 data members. So there'll be a set code, set employees, set year to date, and set target. Then 4 get functions, again, 1 for each of the data members. And then there are going to be 2 additional functions. The first function is going to be called increase YTD, or increase year to date. And I just realized I have a typo in here. This should be a double. So this function is going to be passed a value, and it should be a double, and that value should be added to the year-to-date member. The decrease YTD, or decrease year-to-date function, works exactly the same, but instead of increasing, it's going to decrease the year-to-date data member. So take the value that gets passed in as a parameter and subtract it from the year-to-date data member. And then lastly, you have a display function, and the display function should display all 4 data members in a neatly formatted fashion, much like you've been doing all along. Okay, so that does it for your class header file. And so now here is your implementation file that corresponds with that. And so the division_sales.cpp file is going to contain all the function definitions for each of the function prototypes that you declared inside of the division_sales.h. So what I would encourage you to do is to take a look at the sample files, and I will show you what I mean in just a moment. I just want to get through these slides, and then I'll show you the sample that you have with the accompanying videos on the rectangle class. So just a little more information here on the default constructor. For the default, make sure you're using appropriate initial values. So for example, division code's a string, so you should set it equal to an empty string. For an integer or a double, you'd want to set them equal to 0. Okay, and then for the two functions that I have that are going to modify the year-to-date figure, so increase year-to-date, this function, as I said before, it's going to be passed a double, and that amount that gets passed in should be added to the year-to-date data member. The decrease YTD, it's going to work in the exact same way, except instead of addition, it's going to be subtraction. You're going to decrease the amount from the year-to-date. And so think about the functionality behind that and why you would do that. As you're tracking sales amounts, you may need to increase or decrease that figure at any point in time as you're tracking it. Okay, and then lastly, the main.cpp. This is your driver, and the objective of a driver is to test and run every single function in your class. So I gave you some instructions here on what I would like to see included, but you should think through this logically and think through, okay, how can I test every one of the functions? So create a couple of different objects. So I said declare an object named div1, and in this one in particular, call the default constructor. Then declare another object named div2. Now this time, call the constructor with parameters. And so there you've tested two of the functions right there. My next bullet, call all of the set functions to set the values for division 1, right? Since you only have the default values right now. And so make sure you're sending in the appropriate values for that. And then call the display function to display division 2. And in fact, you should also be displaying division 1, right? We want to, or did we do that with the get functions? I don't think I said that. Let's do that here. Call the get functions to display the members of division 1. Sorry, I didn't originally have that there. Right, so basically what I've asked you to do here then is call the default constructor, the constructor with parameters, the set functions, the get functions, and the display functions. That gets all of them, all of the functions called. Make sure you call the increase Y to year to date and the decrease year to date as well, so that we know that it's working appropriately, and then display again so that you can confirm that it worked appropriately. Okay, documentation. Now, there is a video. Let me talk about the videos in Rectangle. So if I go back to Brightspace, I'm going to point you to right here in Assignment 5 at the very end. There are 3 videos, Rectangle class with 1 file, 3 files, and documentation. So you want to look at this one with 3 files because that's what I'm asking you to do. If you go back, and I believe it includes all 3 of the files. So here's your main file, here's your .h, and the implementation, so you can review these. Okay, and then the documentation video explains how to comment your code. So I recommend you watch these last 2 videos here, and again, they're in the Assignment 5 section of the module. What was the last thing I wanted to mention to you? Here is a slide where I started to do some sample documentation, right? So indicate what you're doing in your driver. You're testing the default constructor, and then write the statement that tests the default constructor. Testing the set functions, right? So when you call div1.setCode, sending it a value, just indicate what it is you're testing at each point in time. And this is just sample documentation for your driver program. Okay, as always, remember that you have the tutoring center available to help you. You can always reach out to me. So if you have any questions, do let me know.